All right, in this Think Aloud video, I'm going to demonstrate the thinking steps that are needed to write a thesis statement for a rhetorical analysis essay. I'm also going to demonstrate what not to do in your thesis statements, as well as a non-exemplar, before showing you at the end an exemplar thesis for a PBA rhetorical analysis essay. All right, so let's start with our thinking steps. In order to write a thesis statement for a rhetorical analysis essay, the first thing you need to do is determine what is the writer's purpose. So, what is the writer trying to get accomplished in his or her text through his or her rhetoric? Two, determine the writer's choices. So, what does the writer use? What techniques, what strategies does the writer use to achieve his or her purpose in their text? Three, we need to choose a precise verb, something beyond persuading, informing, and explaining. So, what verb more precisely describes the writer's purpose? What is the most appropriate and accurate verb that you can think of that would um, summarize what the writer is doing at a specific point in the text to convey their message? And then, lastly, write out a thesis that includes A, the writer's name, which is required, B, the writer's purpose, which is required, C, a precise verb, besides uses, persuading, informing, and explaining, and then D, rhetorical choices, which is optional, but I strongly encourage it because it helps preview the structure of your essay. So, what should your thesis statement not do? Your thesis statement should never, ever, ever provide evidence of the rhetorical choices, message, or purpose in the writer's text. And two, it should never summarize the text that you are analyzing. So let's look at a non-exemplar. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, Martin talks about why he and the civil rights movement is in Birmingham and what his audience needs to do. King appeals to his audience by saying blah, 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 blah. So let's look at this non-exemplar and see how it does not meet the criteria for a thesis statement. First, it addresses the speaker by his first name. And we always address our speaker by the last name. This indicates that you are summarizing what's happening in the text instead of the choices and strategies that the speaker is using to convey a message. It talks about why he and the civil rights movement is in Birmingham and what his audience needs to do. There's no specific mention of the audience and there's no purpose. So what is his purpose for being in Birmingham? What is his perfect purpose for constructing this text? King appeals to his audience by saying, again, there's no reason for quotes because you should never provide evidence of any of these things. That's what the body paragraphs are for. So, taken away from that, if we're following our thinking steps, we have an exemplar thesis that follows all of these thinking steps and criteria says that in order to chastise the Alabama clergymen for adhering to the status quo and criticizing nonviolent direct action for civil rights, Dr. King in his letter references religious leaders he views as, quote, extremists, and expresses his gratefulness for white people who have joined the movement for equal rights. So I start off with the purpose. In order to is an infinitive phrase that indicates that a purpose is going to be discussed. So in order to chastise the Alabama clergymen for adhering to the status quo and criticizing nonviolent direct action, that is King's purpose in this particular section that I'm analyzing. Dr. King in his letter references, precise verb, reference, religious leaders he views as extremists and expresses, another precise verb, his gratefulness for white people who have joined the movement for equal rights. Put all that together and you have an exemplar thesis following the thinking steps I named up top and the success criteria for a thesis statement.